President Muhammadu Buhari appears to be breaking from tradition of leaders, usually referred to as lame dog, in reference to their reduced ability to dispense with the duties of office, owing to limited time they have to do so. Such leaders' ability to act, especially when preparations for the next election hits top gear, is the major reason they are perceived in such light. Not the Nigerian president, seemingly so, a man who in the past couple of weeks has been serving notice of renewed war against insurgents and terrorists who have held the nation by the jugular in the last 10 years or thereabout. But how can Mr. President be able to deal this blow in the final months of his administration, having failed to rout the enemy over the past 7 years? For answers, we are now being joined by Osita Okechukwu, a frontline journalist who is also the Director General of the Voice of Nigeria and member of the President's political party, the All Progressives Congress. You're welcome, sir. Good morning, Mr. Okechukwu.
Good morning, Nigerian.
Good morning. Good to have you on the show.
Good morning.
All right, let's get right to it.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mr. Okechukwu. I know that you are a frontline journalist, of course, and you are also, a strong member of the APC. And a lot of people will say that somebody who is also very close to Mr. President. Tell us, it's going to 7 years of his administration now, and the president is already talking in terms of leaving a legacy. But people will wonder, it will be assessed in different ways. One is the fact that, first, thankfully, his health is no longer a challenge, at least in the last few years. It's not been traveling like before, for health reasons. But then his policies are things that people will look at from different angles. One is the issue of NMPC, of the PIA Bill Act, and of deregulation, for example. He has said, and it looks like nothing will be done to removing the subsidy until after he must have left office, thereby leaving that responsibility for the incoming government. There's also the insecurity challenge, and he's been going about saying that sooner than later, succor will come to the northeast and other parts of Nigeria where there are issues of insecurity. How would you, in your own opinion, assess the president's 7 years, and what legacy, in specific terms, do you think that he will be leaving for Nigerians by the time he exits next year?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that my understanding of what Mr. President is doing is trying to lay the foundation for development, growth, and prosperity of the Nigerian state. And he reckons that when he came to power, the infrastructure deficit was very high, and that without infrastructure, a critical ones for that matter, there is little or nothing you can do to advance the cause of a teeming population of the country, a population that goes by more than 5% per annum. So when Mr. President was confronted with the infrastructure deficit, he said, okay, even if I had to borrow, I will borrow. But unfortunately, the price of oil fell when he came. It was below $40 per barrel. In fact, at times, below 30. So he now started junketing the world, trying to solicit for friends of the country, using his goodwill, which is his most important capital, and the trust the international community has on him, to plead that Nigeria needs to be bailed out. Yes, it didn't come as fast as he wanted. On the security side, we are witnesses on how monies voted by the previous regime for military equipments were siphoned. He had also to go around and start pleading and soliciting for funds, and even for the equipment to be granted him. If he takes something like the Tukuna jets, it's not bought off shelf. It's only when you place others that they will need for you, and it's not completed in a jiffy. Luckily, it's coming at the tail end of Mr. President's exit. And we're happy that the Nigerian Air Force, in their own wisdom, is making good use of that in regions that are devastated by bandits and other insurgents. So what Mr. President is doing, and he will continue to do, is to continue the foundation, because he knows the benefit Nigerians got from him is the goodwill he has. Yes, a lot of people will tell you they thought he could have, by one hand, clutched this security and contain it. It's not done that way. We had an army that had its own plans, but we were unable to meet up with those plans because somewhere along the line, some people diverted the funds meant for the military. Luckily, some of those equipments are coming in, some of those gadgets are coming in, and he will continue to deploy them. And when you talk about the PIA, don't forget that it's a milestone achievement of Mr. President, because the law is like trying to tell a government that you are no more going to put your hand in the cookie jar, because the NNPC was a slush fund for the previous regime. But Mr. President said no. All the studies have shown him that if we did not tidy up the oil industry, then the gains we made in the oil industry will come to nil. And a lot of people are saying, oh, it's bequeathing to the incoming administration. That's not exactly the position. It's not exactly the position for the fact that the Dangote refinery, one of the largest refinery on earth, will be on stream then. And if it comes on stream, we might not face the trajectory we are facing today. The subsidy might not be the same. Even employment itself will increase. The chain of distribution of the products from the Dangote refinery will be different from the chain of importation from abroad. So these differences, that people do not want to look at it from that way. They thought that Mr. President is just trying to bequeath a no-go area to the incoming administration, that is trying to excuse himself from duty. No, that's not exactly the same thing. That's why when the Nigerian state discovered that the Dangote refinery needed extra funding, Mr. President, in his wisdom, he mandated that the Nigerian government should invest 20% on the refinery to quicken the completion of the refinery. So when that was done, a lot of critics also went to town. Oh, why should he invest on a private company? He was investing on the private company to keep an end to the huge subsidy. So when he leaves by next year, by May 29th in 2023, by then the Dangote refinery and other modular refineries will be on the stream. If for nothing, it will cut almost by half the subsidy itself. So Mr. President is not trying to excuse himself or shy away from responsibilities. Now, he had made concrete plans on how to checkmate those losses and how to contain the insecurity. Yes, there is insecurity in the land, palpable one. Nobody will deny that. But the point is, what are the containment measures? Those are in place.
All right, Mr. Okechukwu. Aside from the economy and insecurity, let's talk about the scourge of corruption in Nigeria, which undoubtedly has been quite rife in this country over time. Let's talk. So in spite of fixing the economy, you could have the best infrastructure, world-class facilities. If you still have a reputational damage, which we do have, it basically defeats the purpose, right? So how would you assess this administration's work in this regard? Do you believe that this administration has tackled this issue quite well, in your opinion?
Sincerely, I'm not, without being immodest, anybody that does business with the federal government of Nigeria will know that the procurement process, more than anything, is being followed more diligently than before. Nobody is saying that we will put a cap on corruption in one day. It's a human element. After the word corruption did not emanate from Nigeria. Every language had their own vernacular of what is called corruption. So it's a human issue. But whether strident efforts are being made and is still being made to contain corruption, it is.
I'm sorry, I still have to stay on that question, Mr. Okechukwu. Could you expatiate a little bit more on that? What are some of the measures that this government, or this administration has done, in your opinion, to tackle the issue of corruption?
Yeah, that's why I started by saying that anybody that does business with the federal government of Nigeria will sincerely believe and understand and agree that the process of procurement today is tidier than it used to be before.
Are you talking about parastatals?
Corruption to a certain extent. And ministries and agencies. I'm talking about ministries, departments and agencies, the MDAs, that the regime had made sure that we are cleaner today than we used to be before. Ask any businessman or any contractor of the federal government of Nigeria. He'll be a witness to that. But it's very easy, you know. People forget that we are running a federation where there's the federal government of Nigeria, the state government, and the local councils. Nobody talks about the local councils. Nobody talks about the state governors. But what we are saying is that at the federal level that I've been for now in the last 7 years, that there is an appreciable effort.
All right, just before Adefemi comes in, very quickly, because you, of course, are defending this point. So the Transparency International guidelines completely, it's a whole different thing when you look at that list. So, of course, the international community is going to look at that first, and it's telling a completely different tale. But, of course, Adefemi is going to come in next, and you could go.
All right, dude. All right, thank you, Abby. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? Because while it is true that corruption is not a Nigerian problem, and it seems to be the one thing that many people outside of the country seem to harp on when they talk about the negative sides of Nigeria. It is a valid topic to talk about. As Abby just touched on, Nigeria is currently 154 out of 180 countries on Transparency International's radar when it comes to corruption. So that's not great. And when we cast our minds back to 2015 and the Buhari administration's manifesto, there was a lot of hope, a lot of positive things in social and welfare gatherings, how they were going to restructure or make sure that institutions like the NNPC would serve all Nigerians. If you were to give, and I know, I don't want to throw the word biased at you because we know where you affiliate yourself along the political spectrum, but if you look at the 2015 manifesto, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and you look at the current state of affairs in Nigeria, or some 7 years later, how confident are you that the promises made in that manifesto have, on a majority scale, been achieved? Because many people would say that if you look at those, I think some 81 points, for the last time I checked the manifesto, a lot of them may not have been executed as tidily as they were set out in that point.
Thank you very much. We must come to terms with the truth that democracy is not a revolution. All the gains made in liberal democracy throughout history have been evolutionary. And in terms of restructuring, Mr. President has touched in a very important segment of the restructuring process. But as I said, we are in a federation. It's not a military dictatorship where he could rein everybody to be on the same page. A lot of Nigerians, both the media, our friends in the media, will miss one of the most important restructuring steps Mr. President had taken in the past 7 years. And that was done in the 80th National Assembly. And that was the amendment of Section 121, where Mr. President assented. And even 2 years later, when that amendment was not enforced by state governors across the federation, Mr. President now did what is called the Executive Order 10. I remember the Attorney General of the Federation and Honorable Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami said, telling all the governors, especially those of the APC, of the need to adhere to that amendment. What was the amendment? The amendment was one of the critical segments of the restructuring process, that the first line charge or what is called funding of the state legislatures and the state judiciary should be on first-line charge. That this is their budget. The state governor or the executive at the state level should not hinder that. But a lot of Nigerians glossed over it. They do not know how important it is, both in fighting corruption at the state level, both in making sure that the execution of projects are done at the state level, and even in that bill was the independence of the local councils to reflect actually what was done by the framers of the Constitution on Section 7 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. While the bill was going ahead, the issue of the local council was dropped. But if they had followed what the president wanted, today local government could have been in a state where they are democratically elected and where they can be more accountable. Mr. President did not achieve that one, but it was in the executive bill he presented. But he achieved the amendment of the state legislatures having the first-line charge of funding and the state judiciary. What does that mean? If the governors had allowed the state legislature to have their funding, it had gone away to the independence of the state legislatures. But today, most of the legislatures of the country, I do not know which one that is robust or that takes oversight checks and balances as has been done at the National Assembly. I was in a gathering in my village in Enugu. A young man sauntered in. Everybody stood up, vulnerable. I didn't get up. I didn't know who they are talking about. But they said, you don't know him? I said, please, I don't know you. He said, he's the honorable member representing my constituency. I said, oh, are you so? He said, yes. I said, but we have not heard you talk in the Enugu legislature. He said, Oga, I can't talk. Oh. If I talk, I won't come back. But that's not the democracy we envisaged. You have a judge who had to go cap in hand to look for how to fund the judiciary in his state. And he calls himself a chief judge of the state. Mr. President wanted them to be liberated. And if they were liberated, then it means that the democracy at that level will garner momentum. But I understand from the APC Governors Forum that they are coming back to terms with Mr. President that in due course, they will start implementing the first-line charge to the state legislature and first-line charge. And I plead with them as well, now that the Constitution is being amended, that the local council should be allowed to have a breather. Because the local council gets about 20% of the federation allocation. And it's stocked somewhere in the governor's armpit. While the governor himself gets about 26. So when you combine the 40-something% and nobody's looking at that, all satellite is on the federal side. Nobody talks about the state and the local council. So we should all join hands to plead with our governors to help us to liberate the local councils and to help us to liberate the state legislatures and the state judiciary. If we do that, you cannot build a concrete democracy if the base is porous. But nobody wants to credit with Mr. President with that. All they will tell you that he doesn't believe in restructuring, but he had done one. He had done one. From that one, we'll go to the next step. So please, always help us to remind our governors, of both partisan side, because they all aligned and went to the Supreme Court to hang the matter. It was a bipartisan cooperation that most of the time is unusual. And that is not healthy for our democracy because Mr. President, in his own intendment, had acquitted himself with the 80th National Assembly headed by His Excellency Bukola Saraki. They did so well, said, okay, let's celebrate the democracy at the level where it will help us to checkmate what is going on at the center and at the units. But today we're only talking about the center. Nobody talks about the units.
All right, Mr. Okechukwu. I like the fact that you said the PIA is a milestone achievement. You know, everybody acknowledges that. But then let me draw you quickly back to the hazy issue of the subsidy regime. A lot of Nigerians believe that if anybody should know why this subsidy issue is very concerning, it should be the president, because he was a head of state, he was chairman PTF, he's been a petroleum minister, and he's been a petroleum minister since, for 7 years under this administration, which he heads. He came in during the campaign period 2014-2015, specifically to say that, one, not only didn't he understand what they meant by subsidy, but I felt that who was subsidizing who, and that it must be a fraud if things were not clear. Has anything changed since the president got to power for us in 2022 to still be talking about 1.3 trillion subsidy in Nigeria? The same regime that the president condemned wholeheartedly when he was coming in. If something has changed, don't you think that the president owes Nigerians the duty to tell us what has happened in the country for an NNPC that we still do not know the volume of petrol that we consume on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? Yes, we are paying trillions in subsidy. Don't you think that this is one major legacy that the president ought to bequeath to Nigerians? At least, exposing the fraud and the rot in that sector. Will it be fair to Nigerians if he leaves office next year without actually, not necessarily tackling it, but telling Nigerians what the issues are?
My little experience is that when you come into power, let me take, for instance, when I came into Voice of Nigeria in May 2016, I did not know that Voice of Nigeria had no head office. But when I came there, now told me, oh, where you are is Radio House. It's owned by Radio Nigeria, our parent agency, where we were a department before we got our independent kind of. I said, what happened? And now told me, oh, that we are just here as quarters since 1991 we came in. I said, okay, I've lived in Abuja for almost 30 years plus. Where is the Voice of Nigeria in the master plan? Oh, they said it was allocated to Yaradua Center. Given the exigencies of the time, General Yaradua being one of the heroes of democracy, I now started battling. But while I was outside, I didn't know until we located an EFCC seized property. And Mr. President graciously gave us an approval in principle. And I got to EFCC. The then chairman of EFCC, Ibrahim Magu, told me that it's on interim forfeiture. Will you wait? I said, yes, we are ready to wait. We pursued it from 2016 to 2019. But if you're outside, he wouldn't know. So I think that exactly the same thing happened to Mr. President. When he got the files, don't forget that Mr. President took about 6-7 months to go through the files before he composed his cabinet. And then he looked at the rot going on in the petroleum industry, started buckling, started selling even what they call the purchase sharing formula that we were owing the international oil companies. He started payment. When he's about existing from that, he brought the PIA bill that had been in the cooler, coming and going for almost 20 years. I think that is the understanding of President Buhari, that the rot had to be stopped. It could have been easy. As Minister of Petroleum, you appoint the Minister of State, you appoint the GMD, you see that like others as a slush fund, but he didn't see it that way. If you had seen it that way, he would not pass it, make sure that the bill is passed and assented to the bill. So what I'm saying is that Mr. President looked into the file. What he did not know why he was outside the system. They now confronted him with it, that this is it, this is that. And he came to say, okay, how do we stop this? They told him, this is the bill, that the law can stop it. Make NNPC a commercial enterprise, like Aramco in Saudi Arabia, Petronas and others in different oil-producing companies. So, yes, Mr. President said there was no this, but when he came to power, with late Professor David West, he called in Professor West and others, and they said, yes, there is subsidy. Why should it persist? What is an end to it? And the end to it is the PIA Act.
All right, Mr. Okechukwu, let's digress a little bit and look at the topic of ethnic division in Nigeria, which is another existing issue, we will all agree. Now, many of are of the opinion that this country has never been more divided. Let's get your outlook on that view. And of course, what roles do you believe that this administration has played in unifying Nigerians?
Yes, I'm not one of those. I cannot come here and say I'm happy that Nigeria is divided. I'm not happy. But as a social scientist, if I tell you why we got divided, you might agree with me, you might disagree with me.
Would like to hear it either way, yeah.
The previous... I'm coming. I'm trying to lead you to why we are divided. Lack of economic growth brings with it its own havoc to the system. When the previous regime did privatization of an issue like electricity, unluckily for the Nigerian state, like the disco companies, it was not transparently done. And because it tidied up, I've once told you here at this channel that when the files were opened, the agreement between those privatized companies and the Nigerian state was like an agreement done by a tenant for the landlord. It became difficult to unbundle. Take the distribution companies from the north to the east, west to the south. Is there any clean performance? And why is it not so? Now, President Buhari now said, okay, let me look internationally. And they now found Siemens. And Siemens brought a cushioning effect on how to get this done. But it's becoming still difficult because the disco companies had an agreement that if you go through those agreements, you will shed tears. You will say, who wrote this agreement on behalf of the Nigerian state? It was the tenants that wrote the agreement for the landlord. So when you could not fix the power sector as fast as we wanted to fix, there is bound to be some disconnect. Because those were where the small-scale industries could have germinated and grown faster all over the world. The small-scale and medium industries employ more labor than any government on earth. Okay, Mr. President said, okay, let's also look into how to return people back to land. And he went with what is called the Buharis program. Yes, it had not germinated as we wanted, but I believe that any regime that comes tomorrow, if they could lay hands on the Buharis program, they'll end up creating a rural middle class. This is what we're looking for, a rural middle class, where people will be prosperous at their rural communes, and they will also grow. Because if we are prosperous in your rural commune, your essence of migrating to the urban center will be very low. And that's what Mr. President, in his agrarian revolution, is intending to do. And immediately the issue of insecurity is contained, the farmers will be in full gear. And that rural middle class, which Mr. President aimed to construct for the Nigerian state, will be done. I hope the new regime will not bypass the ingredients of the critical infrastructure Mr. President had invested in, and they consolidate it and sustain it. If that is sustained, in a few years' time, we will not be saying Nigeria is divided. We are divided because we are hungry. It's very easy to look at your neighbor and think that your neighbor is the cause of your crisis. Anytime anybody is hungry, the neighbor becomes his enemy. It has been done throughout history. So the issue is, how do we, as Mr. President said, produce what we eat? The day is coming, and it is going to come sooner than people anticipate, where we produce what we eat. He had made an arrangement to mechanize agriculture. He had gotten an 885 million euro loan. And luckily for us, the distinguished Senator Ahmed Lawan and the Right Honorable Bajabe Amila have been very helpful in cooperating with Mr. President. That cooperation is going to yield fruit. So we're not on the wrong edge of the sword. All we just needed is to buckle up the rail line, the network, and if Siemens addition that our electricity can have weight, then Nigeria will look forward. But let us also advise ourselves that we must look inwards. The NALDA, National Land Development Authority, has a 109 program to invest in every senatorial district of the country. But there are some areas like where I'm coming from are resisting that project. Please, don't resist good program. It's for the citizenry. It's for the community. And we can grow by having a rural middle class. It's been done in different parts of the world.
Understood. I don't want to preempt any response Abby may have, but if we start on the beginning of her question, which was on the ethnic disparities in this country, it does find a way to obviously dominate political discourse in this season, especially as we move ahead towards a new general election. You know, the two leading parties, leading in terms of, I guess, let me not give them a name that's not valid to them, but leading in terms of their representation and their popularity. Of course, the current political party in power, the All Progressive Congress, and their direct rival being the People's Democratic Party. Now, the two of them have different beliefs as it pertains to representation along ethnic lines. One party being open to the prospect of zoning, and the other saying that they don't really have the appetite to explicitly zone positions or their political ticket. With you being on the side of the APC, and you also hailing from the southeast of this country, or Enugu's southeast? Yeah. Again, the geography there, little by little. I wonder how you feel about zoning and whether or not you think that it is time, perhaps as your party also dictates, that perhaps geography should have a role in whoever would emerge. Do you think the next president should also come from the southeast?
My sister, the good thing that has happened in the past 22 years of our democracy is that we have graduated. We run a multi-party system. Our two dominant political parties had emerged. That is the same thing in the UK, in the US, in India, in Brazil, in Pakistan, in Indonesia. So we are in a good stead as far as liberal democracy is concerned by running a multi-party system and having two dominant parties whereby the citizenry had to choose from either APC or from PDP. But for the zoning is part of our human nature, right from independence. When the late Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, was Prime Minister, a Northerner was not the president. He was a Southerner. When Gowon became the head of state, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, of blessed memory, was his deputy. Gowon did not choose a Northerner to be his deputy, so it's not a new thing. When Shagari in 1979, when Murtala Mohammed, of blessed memory, became head of state, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was his deputy. He did not choose a Northerner. When Shagari became president in 1979, he chose Dr. Alex Ekweme, both of blessed memory, who is a Southerner. So people are talking about zoning as if it's a new introduction. The only thing new about zoning that I could decipher is that in 1999, the political gladiators had acted as patriots and said it should go south. And that when it finishes in the south, it should come north. And luckily, the two leading political parties then microzoned it to the southwest. Both Chief Olufalaye and Chief Olusegun Obasanjo came from the Southwest. In 2007, the same patriotism guided the nomination that led to Musa Yar'Adua from Northwest and President Muhammadu Buhari from Northwest. Let us discuss what happened, because that was unintended. Nobody knew. The Constitution did not envisage that a president would die and what happens next. And Jonathan took over. Now, Mr. President will end by 2023. And if you talk of equity, good conscience, and natural justice, it should go to the South. And if it goes to the South, luckily for us from Southeast, our brothers in the Southwest had had the presidency for 8 years. By the close of events, vice president for 8 years. And our brothers from the South had had the president for 5 to 6 years. So the Southeast is the only region or geopolitical zone that had not presided over the country, especially from the Aso Rock Villa. So if anybody is sincerely talking of giving the Igbos a sense of belonging and they're trying to reintegrate everybody, I think this should be done. Even some had even said that the Igbos from Delta Rivers can also be included. I'm not objecting to that one. But let's give us a sense of belonging. We are true patriots. We live in every village of the country. And we invest in everywhere we live. We build houses. No ethnic group had invested outside their region more than the Igbo people. No ethnic group. We invest in Lagos as if Lagos is our home. We invest in Kano as if Kano is in our home. We invest in Abuja as if it's our own. We invest in UGEB. We invest in Oron. We invest in Duse. We invest in Mubi. So we are true patriots. Please, let's not be distracted by what my young brother Nnamdi Kanu and his own fringe elements are doing. Let's not take it. That's not the mainstream Igbo thinking. Nnamdi Kanu does not represent the mainstream Igbo. He doesn't. Let's be clear about that. They do not represent the main thinking of the Igbo group. These are young people. So let nobody take them to represent us. Our representation, as reflected by Professor George Obiozo, the President General for Hanese, the other time in Arise. Those are the people who were elected in terms of social cultural group to represent Igbo. So please, let's not mix the agitation of my young brother and the others as if it is the mainstream Igbo. No, that is not the position. So I sincerely believe that the APC and PDP should seriously put their thinking cap and zone the presidency. Even if you don't want to situate it in Southeast only, you can situate it in the Igbo areas. Let them, both of them, nominate an Igbo as their presidential candidates.
Will you personally be interested in throwing your heart into the ring as an Igbo APC member, perhaps? Or will you be backing? Or will you be backing anyone?
No, if the leadership says, Osita, you can go. I have my idea of how to turn around the country. I know what the North wants. I know what the West wants. I once told one of my friends that for me, the Igbos and the Yorubas are not enemies. They are competitors. And for the North, I know what the North wants. I know that the North can be developed. I know that. But even if I'm not, I'll contribute my little quota as I'm doing today.
Very quickly, Mr. Okechukwu, before we wrap up, we just Steve had asked earlier, what would you say, and this could be, you could be biased in a way considering you have the same party, what would you say very briefly is President Buhari's, would be his legacy? I don't think you addressed that question earlier.
His legacy is the critical infrastructure. The infrastructure he has put on the ground, history will bear his witness. Is it critical infrastructure like rail lines, Second Niger Bridge? Even a lot of people forgot that in 2001, the then President Olusegun Obasanjo awarded Lagos to Abeokuta, to Julius Berger, a prime company, one of the foremost companies in Nigeria. Today is President Muhammadu Buhari that is completing that. A lot of people forget that. Lagos Ibadan, Lagos Bini, second Niger Bridge, with all the pleasantries, is President Muhammadu Buhari that brought the first set of gravel, the first shovel of gravel, the first stick of rods to start the second Niger Bridge. It's about 90% closing. And when I talk about agriculture, a lot of people do not understand. When the equipment that will mechanize, thoroughly mechanize Nigerian agriculture, they are going to have service centers and hiring centers in all the 774 local government areas across the country. It's not the old type where you dump the tractors or the harvesters. It's going to be managed by both government and the public sector, whereby if your tractor gets broken down where you're farming, you call back to the hiring center, and another tractor will be driven down to your farm, and they take it back and repair. By that time, Nigeria will be in a position to produce what we eat, and we will start paying our loans. We can pay our loans faster than we think.
Understood.
If we develop
Mr. Okechukwu.
the
Thank you very much for joining us. That was Osita Okechukwu, who is, of course, a member of the All Progressive Congress. Thank you for joining us on the morning show today.